Can you make something with a team while someone on that team doesn't even like the very genre of what you're making? For example, Tom York of Radiohead has gone on record saying he hates rock music and the culture around it. But yet, Radiohead has been a very successful band over the last 20 years. And on the flip side of that, Garth Ennis hates superheroes, and he wrote a superhero comic called The Boys, which, well, there's a reason people talk about the show and not the comics. Shining Force on the Sega Genesis is a game that thankfully finds itself like the former. It's a strategy RPG that you might find pulls through as a solid title, despite its creator's dislike of the strategy RPG genre. Shining Force is a game where you take control of the titular Shining Force, doing battle against the evil monster army of Runefast. On your journey, you will go across the land, acquiring the aid of all manner of fantasy creatures, ranging from dragons, to magical furries, to centaurs, and to whatever the hell yogurt is. And you'll make use of their unique spells, weapons, and movement types to clear over 30 grid-based maps through the game's 8 chapters. Your objective is usually to kill the enemy commander, though sometimes you'll need to rip and tear through every individual enemy to clear a map. There's no defend maps of any kind. Your goal is always bloody conquest. The gameplay of Shining Force is quite simple. It's an agility-based strategy RPG, meaning unlike in games like Fire Emblem and Into the Breach, which have the player and enemy command all their units at once by having their own phases, Shining Force uses every individual unit's agility stat with a dose of RNG to determine who moves when. And when it's your turn to move, you'll either do a regular attack, cast a spell, or use an item. Very typical JRPG stuff. While the command list is very rudimentary, the fun comes in the sheer variety of spells and units at your disposal. You can use powerful AoE spells to rip through groups of enemies at once, you can heal your allies from great distances away, and of course, nothing beats taking your big sword and going swish swoosh through an enemy's vital organs. Shining Force is one of those games where you instantly lose if your main character dies, but as long as he's at least ticking by 1 health, you can throw away the lives of all of your other units as much as you want, as long as you can pay the church $5 to bring them back. This can create scenarios, especially later on in the game, where the enemies are ferocious, sometimes being capable of taking an ally out in a single shot if you're not careful, and that makes fighting almost every enemy feel intense. Enemies have their own strengths and weaknesses. Some are highly evasive, meaning you need to rely on bow's high accuracy or mage's inability to miss to hit them reliably. Some can have huge movement, requiring a tanky unit to lure them out of hiding, and so on and so forth. The enemy variety can all be beaten just by assembling a bunch of strong dudes and hitting them really hard, but it rewards the player for knowing what to hit them with in a way that isn't taking advantage of some kind of type chart. This really comes through in the game's bosses. Some of the most intense strategy RPG gameplay moments I've ever had come from this game. Take, for example, the Marionette, a boss very early on in Chapter 2 that is incredibly overstated for this point in the game. It has endgame level freeze magic, powerful physical attacks, high evasion, and a regenerating health bar, creating a very stressful fight where you need to throw everyone at it, but not too carelessly that you group up and you lose multiple units at once to its magic. You'll watch your units die one by one as you hope they can land a hit and do everything they can to scratch it. And by what is certainly a group effort akin to an MMO raid boss, you'll take it down with scarce few units left alive. The game doesn't throw bosses like this at you constantly, but they throw them often enough that they're very stressful. The fun kind of stressful, without overstaying their welcome. The boss design in this game is fantastic. But Shining Force's unit design is hands down the most creative thing about it. It takes full advantage of being a fantasy game and includes some really swanky units. For example, Your flying units are not riding Pegsai or Griffins, they're a race of magic bird people. Your cavalry aren't men and women on horseback, they're centaurs. They are the horseback. And then there are unique allies, like a crazy old inventor who rides a steampunk flying machine and is your only flying lance unit in the game. Or speaking of steampunk, there's an anthropomorphic armadillo who fights in heavy steampunk armor and serves as the game's only armored unit. He's an armor-dillo. This is the greatest game ever made. The unit diversity being so vast means that even though the combat itself is very basic, the desire to play with all of these weirdos makes the simplicity much more charming. However, Shining Force is more than just its battles. It also has segments where you explore towns like a traditional JRPG, talking to NPCs, opening chests, and the like. The exploration is just as big as the strategy. Digging through the world to discover all kinds of secret units and weapons feels just like a Dragon Quest game. In fact, that's exactly what the creators were going for. Only two of the game's staff, programmer Yoshinori Tagawa and character designer Yoshihiro Tamaki, even wanted to make a strategy game. The game's director Kenji Orimo was hesitant, and in the case of producer Hiroyuki Takahashi, he was outright against the idea of making a strategy RPG at all, thinking of Shining Force as a traditional RPG, no S included, and being incredibly inspired by Dragon Quest. The team's diverse viewpoints lead to Shining Force's more JRPG elements, and as a result, is the reason for all the very cool and unique things about this game. And as a result, it's also to blame for all of the game's problems. Let's start with the good. Because it's trying to imitate Dragon Quest, its story is very solid. The game's main character, Max, is a silent protagonist. Your tactician Nova is the only character who consistently speaks in the story, and even then, he often doesn't say that much. Instead of trying to tell the story of a person, it instead tells the story of the world. As you explore the vast lands of Runeterra, you see all kinds of unique nations and how they're reacting to the evil invasions of Runefast. Do they stand strong in defiance? Do they bend the knee out of fear? Or do they exist outside of its influence entirely? Seeing every new locale and meeting the people that live there drives the story instead of your party's opinions on what's going on, and I think that's really cool and unique, especially for the time it came out. For example, in the start of the game, Max is given command of the Shining Force to do a simple mission by the King of Guardiana, the kingdom where Max lives. The town people live their lives in happiness, with the only unpleasant thing is that the knights of the land are jealous that the king trusts Max instead of them, so they're kind of mean. Not really any grand problems to worry about. But after the first map is beaten, Runefast's knights reveal that they were attacking Guardiana while the Shining Force was distracted, and when you get back, the devastation is incredible. Nearly the entire town is destroyed, the king and his lead general are killed, and Max is left to pick up the hopes of the broken people. The knights are now all humbled, and ask only for Max to save the world, and this opening scene perfectly sets the stage for the rest of the game, and is a great example of how Shining Force's narrative can be told despite essentially not having any characters. But Shining Force's story has its Dragon Quest roots in ways other than just the serious moments. It also remembers to breathe easy and be a little silly sometimes. For example, in that opening bit, the only place in Guardiana that isn't destroyed is the tavern, because the town's only dwarf stood defense for it. Runefast could destroy the town, it could burn the church, it could kill the king, but it was not touching his booze, which is the most dwarf thing to ever dwarf. Much like how in Dragon Quest XI, Rab can have a serious, genuinely tear-jerking moment where he sees the soul of his dead daughter move into the next life, and then later on have a stupid scene where his inspiring speech is ruined because a porno magazine drops out of his bag. Shining Force isn't afraid to balance the stakes of the story with light-hearted charm. Games like Dragon Quest and Shining Force aren't telling stupid stories, they're telling stories that aren't afraid to be stupid, which is a very important distinction. The charm also extends to all kinds of other areas. A lot of NPCs will have a wide range of funny things to say, reading bookshelves gives all kinds of sensible chuckles, and you can even go down into your headquarters and talk to your units. The ones who are on the bench and not in your active army will all just be chillin', drinking and passing the days away. Some are upset that they're on the bench, while others are more than content to be out of the front lines. My favorite dumb joke in all of it is that if you name Max Sega at the start of the game, he gets an extra point of base HP and magic. It's literally that image of Obama giving himself the medal. It's a bunch of little things like that that keep the world engaging. And because the world is engaging, you want to talk to everyone you meet. Thus, it feeds into the exploration aspect. It's all very well done. Moving off of the story, the graphic and sound design is also phenomenal. The sprite work is colorful, with some really great monster and character designs. The animations are quick, simple, but still satisfying to watch. And the sound design really helps sell the animations. The sound effects when you get hit, get a critical, or something dies is perfect, and helps you feel the impact of every attack. The music is also solid as well. The peaceful town tracks are nice, the battle tracks are energetic, it's perfect for whatever situation it's used in. I know the Genesis sound font isn't everyone's cup of tea, and standing next to Genesis soundtrack goats like Sonic or Vector Man might make it not stand out as much, but I think it's a really good soundtrack. Well, I've sung this game's praises, but it's not perfect. The gameplay has a lot of quirks that can be really annoying. The lack of weapon variety further makes the basic combat more noticeable. There's no effective weaponry or anything, it's just equip the best weapon you could afford. The lack of weapon variety makes the different weapon types really not feel distinct. Outside of the fact that some lances are actually spears and can be thrown for 2-range combat, hitting an enemy with a lance feels no different than hitting it with an axe, which feels no different than hitting it with a sword, outside of the scarce few magic weapons that I wish there were more of. It's a minor complaint, but coming from Fire Emblem that has all kinds of circumstantial weapons that makes inventory management significant, I feel like Shining Force falls flat in that regard. The experience system is also really annoying. On paper, it works just like Fire Emblem. You need 100 points to level up no matter what level you are, and weaker enemies give less experience. But in Shining Force, EXP gains cap at 48. Even if you are a level 1 unit killing a level 30 boss, you're only getting 48 experience points. That cutoff is really unsatisfying, meaning bare minimum you need 3 combats to level up, but Shining Force is the only RPG I can think of that doesn't keep extra experience points after a level up. Meaning, if you are level 1 and have 99 XP, get 48 XP, you aren't level 2 with 47 XP, you are level 2 with 0 XP. And because of the weird 48 XP cutoff, you are going to waste a ton of experience throughout your journey, and it's going to feel bad every time. It makes leveling up, one of the most satisfying things a game can ever do, feel bad half the time. And the promotion system is... well, I don't know if it's bad, it's just weird. Promoting in RPGs is usually simple. You get more stats and access to new abilities, like when you evolve a Pokemon. In Shining Force, unpromoted units cap at level 20, and promotion gives you access to stronger weapons. About halfway through the game, new weapons stop being equipable by unpromoted units, and that acts as your cue to start promoting. But promotion decreases your stats and makes you weaker. In exchange, though, your growth rates skyrocket. You go from gaining only 1 or 2 points in a few stats every level up to gaining upwards of 5 or 6 points in a single stat. In fact, it gets so ridiculous, my friend Nam says she once saw a unit get 14 speed in one level up, which just imagine if that happened in Fire Emblem. I don't know if this promotion system is a bad system, it's just strange and nothing else I've seen is like it. But my last real issue is the game's maps. Namely, the amount of maps that are just traversing the overworld. Now in a regular JRPG, traversing the overworld is a key component. You're discovering new towns, getting into random encounters to level up, unearthing secrets, etc. But in a strategy RPG, you want your maps to have thought behind them to force new strategies. A lot of Shining Force's maps prioritize being a traditional world map, with random terrain scattered everywhere and large open spaces, which doesn't work for a strategy RPG that well. A lot of the world maps are also fought on twice per chapter, and though you don't fight them from the same starting positions, it does still feel repetitive. This is where Shining Force's Dragon Quest influence needed to be combed back a bit. Just because it works there, doesn't mean it works here. And it also doesn't work because the world map isn't freely traversable. Whenever you clear one of the game's 8 chapters, you move on to a whole new map with no way to go back to the previous chapter. So you don't get the feeling of going back with the ultimate key like in Dragon Quest, or going back with the airship like in Final Fantasy. Meaning Shining Force lacks the very things that would make traversing a world map exciting in the first place. It also doesn't really even have anything to discover in the world map. There's a house in the first chapter that's completely optional and has a secret unit in it, but no other chapter does that. It just feels like the map traversal was put there because, Dragon Quest did it, where I think Shining Force would have benefited more from a Gaiden-style world map, where you just pick a town and explore it, because exploring towns is very fun to do. Still, even with those faults, the charm of it all carries it to the end. I think it's definitely worth picking up nearly 30 years after it came out. And thankfully, Sega is really good about making their big Genesis titles easily accessible. If you want to play Streets of Rage, there are a million ways to play Streets of Rage. If you want to play Golden Axe, there are a million ways to play Golden Axe. If you want to play Altered Beast, you're a fucking liar. Shining Force has also gotten this treatment. It's available on Steam for $1. It's on Nintendo Switch's online expansion pass for Sega Genesis. It's part of the Sega Genesis Classics collection for modern consoles, and going back a few console generations, it was on Sonic Ultimate Genesis collection for Xbox 360 and PS3, and going even further back, it was on Sega Smash Pack 2 for PC. It is very easy to get a hold of Shining Force and try it for yourself. And speaking of that last one, that's how I played the game when I was a 5-year-old in kindergarten. I remember booting up Sega Smash Pack 2 and sucking ass at Comix Zone and Kid Chameleon, but the one that kept me coming back was Shining Force. I was obsessed, and played it on the computer every day after school. I remember I wrote all about it in the journal we had to keep for class. Other kids would talk about, toys or sports or something, and I was talking about my quest to kill the Dark Dragon. And as nostalgic as that is, this next memory is even more important, because I remember being left at the video game demo section of Target by my grandmother, as was the style at the time, and on their new Game Boy Advance games kiosk was a game that, to my child eyes, looked like Shining Force. It played on a grid, and obviously, I thought, Shining Force invented grids, so I begged my grandma for it. And that was how little old me got a copy of Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, my first Fire Emblem game. Without Shining Force, I never would have gotten into the strategy RP genre, and by extension, I never would have gotten into Fire Emblem. And then, this channel wouldn't exist. So, maybe I made this video as a love letter to what started it all for me. And I hope that you, yes, you, give it a chance to love it just as much as I do. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, or else I will come to your house and make you feel unsafe. I would like to give a big thanks to some people that looked over the script for me. My friends Guy, Nam, and Forte. They all looked it over, gave me ideas on what to write about, and I greatly appreciate it. Please also consider following me on Twitter or joining my Discord server. Links to both are down below. I like to post my thoughts in there sometimes. And most of the time in Discord, it's just me talking about the Baltimore Orioles. Also consider following my Patreon, where for as little as $3 a month, you can help support this channel. Link to that is also down below. Thank you very much, and I'll see you when I make my next game review in 4 months.